Hi guys, welcome to the channel. This is What If Goku Was in Fairy Tale. Before we start, remember to like and subscribe to help the channel. Also check the description for the creator of the fanfic. Chapter 1. The Encounter. Shockwaves of pure energy were sent blasting through the multiverse after the collision between the two gods. The destruction of the Infinity Gauntlet disrupted the balance of power in reality itself, altering the lives of every single thing it touched. Ripples rushed across a million different realms, dimensions, worlds, and universes, changing everyone it touched in some way. But of course, some changes are more significant than others. In one dimension, Clark Kent truly became the nerdy reporter he was always trying to be. In another, a spider-themed hero was able to successfully thwart an attempt to switch his body and murder him. In a third, a demon fox overwhelmed the attempts to trap it within a child and leveled the entire village. A white-haired man and his raven-haired protege lead the survivors on the path to rebuilding their home, eventually allowing them to become the strongest village their world had ever seen. On a fourth world, a chicken decided against crossing a road, thus eliminating an endless supply of tasteless jokes from ever existing. It is in a fifth world where this story begins. A small 10-year-old boy was trekking back towards his mountain home after managing to catch a fish large enough to be considered supper. Said fish was nearly 3 times the size of the 10-year-old carrying it, and had been caught while attempting to snag the child's tail. Checking the sky, the boy increased his pace slightly, wanting to be home before the full moon came out. He didn't want to accidentally run into the monster that killed his grandpa Gohan. When the boy reached his home, he set up a fire to cook the fish and went inside his small shack. The only furnishings to be found were a small bed and a shrine with an orange ball star sitting on top of it. The 4 red stars gleamed on its surface in the dying daylight. The boy walked straight up to the shrine and kneeled down before the ball. "Hi Grandpa, I hope you are doing alright in there. I really miss being able to talk to you." "Don't worry, I'm doing alright. I even caught a really big fish today. It should keep my tummy nice and full for a whole day. I would give you some, but the last time I did that it just sat there until it went bad, so I don't think that you can eat in there. I've been practicing all of the fighting moves you've taught me and I think I'm getting loads better. I beat up one of the dinosaurs that live in the woods this morning." The orange ball made no response, yet the boy seemed content to just continue talking. He chatted with the ball for the entire 20 minutes it took for his meal to cook, and then returned to continue telling of his day the minute he finished eating. Eventually he grew tired, and with a lazy wave the child went to bed. By the time the full moon rose above him, the young boy was sleeping soundly. In another realm, a different child was staring up at the moon. The red-haired 9-year-old had just barely escaped a slave camp where she had been forced to work from sunup to sundown every single day in an attempt to construct a magical tower. In a fit of desperation, she picked up a sword and led the prison's first and only revolt. She had nearly succeeded in freeing everyone, only to be betrayed by her best friend and made out to be the enemy. Instead of fighting their way to freedom together like she had dreamed of every night, she had been cast adrift, stuck on a small boat with no guarantee of surviving back to the mainland. It had taken her more than a day to maneuver the ship back to shore safely, only to find herself on a deserted beach that led into a massive forest and no sign of civilization. With no options available to her, the girl had entered the woods in an attempt to find someone that could help her. Her one good eye constantly scanned her surroundings, never letting her guard down for a second. The betrayal was still fresh in her mind, and now that she was alone there was absolutely no way she would allow herself to relax again. By the time night had come around, she had already forced herself to travel nearly a dozen miles through the woods without a single break. When she had finally stopped for the night, the first thing she did was collapse onto her back. Her lone eye stared up at the sky to drink in the sight of the moon as it cast its pale light across the forest. The sight reminded her of nights where she and her friends had gazed up at the sky from their jail cell, dreaming of freedom. Now she had finally found it. The girl wanted nothing more than to be back in the cell with the people she loved. She didn't care about being free anymore if there wasn't anyone for her to share it with. With tears trailing down her face, the girl rolled onto her side and slept. The young boy had woken up shortly after dawn, intent of spending the morning training before he needed to track down more food. After grabbing his red staff and attaching the sheath to his back, he took the first step out of his home, hoping to find something to fight. Instead he caught sight of a strange discoloration in the air above him. The distortion was a sickly green and was gradually expanding around the area above him. The light slowly grew brighter and brighter, practically boiling the air until it exploded in a colorful flash. When the energy faded away, there was nothing more than a crater where the boy in the house had stood. Several more of these explosions happened around the world, leaving half a dozen other craters scattered across the planet. This world would later be put in peril when a green-skinned demon rose up to take over. Without any heroes to match him, the planet fell to his rule for nearly a decade until a long-haired alien arrived. Enraged at being unable to find the person he was looking for, the alien slayed the demon along with every single living being he could find on the planet. The world was later sold to an intergalactic conqueror who turned it into his 94th vacation home. The tiny alien lived there comfortably for 3 years until he died at the hands of his gold-haired lieutenant. So it goes. The young girl glared at the group of men surrounding her. 5 men, all clearly part of some sort of bandit gang. They were currently discussing how much they would be able to sell her to their connection in the underground slave trade. Seriously man, just looking at her I can tell she'll be a dime when she grows up. I bet we can probably push for an extra grand with her. No way, she's damaged goods. See that eye patch? We would be lucky to get the regular full price in the shape she's in. It looks like she hasn't eaten anything in days, she can barely stand up. The redhead scowled at this. They were right. Between the rebellion, her journey on the boat, and the trek through the forest, she was quickly approaching her physical limit. She hadn't eaten any food in nearly 3 days and had barely been able to find herself enough water to keep going. She had no weapons, no supplies, and the only piece of clothing she wore was practically a repurposed pillowcase. The men around her were all wearing some type of light leather armor and wielding large spiked maces. They had come across her small camp in the early morning, catching her by surprise before she even had the chance to fully wake up. Now they were talking about her like she wasn't even there, like she wasn't even a threat to them. Not only that, they were planning on selling her straight back into slavery like what she had just escaped. She wouldn't let that happen, not after everything that she had already gone through. She would not let them take her. They will not take her. Raahh. Calling on the raging energy that had allowed her to escape from the tower, she screamed. The sudden release of the girl's power caught all of the men off guard. An aura of light purple energy caught all 5 men's weapons, ripping them all from their grasps and smashing them into each other's heads. The weapons then began flying as if wielded by phantoms, hammering into the men far harder than any 9-year-old had a right to hit. All 5 ended up being pounded into the ground in a matter of seconds. Completely spent, the young girl collapsed to her knees. Her head hung down as she tried desperately to catch her breath. Her vision was already blurring. Such a huge burst of power was far too much for her to safely manage in such horrible shape. She doubted she would even be able to stand for the next few hours. Well damn, you're a tough bitch aren't you? The girl's eye widened in shock as she looked up to see one of the bandits standing over her, a blue glow covering both of his hands. Too bad you didn't know that I'm a mage as well, otherwise you might have had a shot. Now though, you are at your limit and I'm going to cash you in. Mages at your age can go for quite a pretty penny. The bandit brought his hands together, the blue energy combining to form a single pulsing sphere. Alright bitch, time to go to sleep. The bandits leapt forward to strike, intent on knocking the girl out before she could recover. The redhead merely closed her eye, accepting yet another miserable turn in her short life. Power pole, extend. The girl's eye snapped back open when she heard the yell, regaining her focus just in time to see a red bow staff smash into the side of her attacker's face. The man was sent sprawling backwards and the energy from his attack dispersed harmlessly back into the air. The man returned to his feet just in time to receive a flying kick to the face from a young boy with spiky black hair. The bandit was immediately knocked unconscious, the surprise attack having left him no time to defend. After a quick glance around at the other bandits, the boy turned to the young girl, offering her a hand with a wide grin. Hi, I'm Son Goku, what's your name? The girl looked at the hand for a moment before clasping it, allowing the boy to help her to her feet. My name is Urza, Urza Scarlet. Chapter 2. Friends. Goku picked himself up off the ground from where the explosion had thrown him. He counted himself lucky, since his face had broken his fall and protected his tail. Getting to his feet, the young boy looked around, blinking the spots out of his eyes. He hadn't a clue what that explosion was, but he did know one thing: he was definitely not in the mountains anymore. His grandpa's hut laid at the base of a huge tree, one of many that covered the area. It appeared that he had ended up in an enormous forest. The ground surrounding the hut looked freshly dug up, as though the house had been thrown there and destroyed everything that laid in that space before it. Grabbing his power pole from his satchel, the young boy began to venture out to try and figure out what had happened. I bet it was some nasty old witch. Grandpa always warned me about them, they probably want to get all of my fish. Goku continued exploring outward, scanning the area for several minutes. He didn't recognize any of the plant life, and the terrain was strange to him as well. Living in the mountains, he had become accustomed to seeing far out over the horizon. All of the trees made him feel quite cramped. However, the discomfort and confusion were immediately forgotten once he noticed a plant covered in small green beans. Oh boy, food. I'm so hungry. I wonder how they taste. Goku picked one of the beans off of the bush and popped it into his mouth. While the bean lacked flavor, he suddenly felt as though his entire body was filled with energy and his stomach was full. Whoa, it's gotta be some kind of magic bean. My tummy doesn't feel empty anymore, it's like I ate an entire lake full of fish. Woohoo! Goku started running around, excited by his newfound discovery. Rah! Goku stopped jumping around as he heard a high-pitched scream behind him. He turned to see a purple glow emanating from deep within the woods. Goku stretched out his senses in an attempt to discover what was going on, and the sounds of combat reached his ears shortly afterward. Oh boy, a fight! The boy launched himself into the air, jumping through the trees like a monkey until he reached the source of what he'd heard. There were several unconscious figures lying on the ground around a small child with red hair, and a very angry-looking man was standing over her. Goku looked from the child to the man in indecision, unsure of who to attack. As the man went forward to strike the red head, Goku decided that he was the bad guy. Power pole, extend. Goku slammed the pole into the man's face, knocking him down and away from the girl. He then launched himself forward to deliver a hard kick, knocking the bandit out just as he was beginning to get up. The spiky-haired boy quickly glanced around at the other bandits to make sure they were out cold. He noticed one of them was still groaning, so he smacked that one on the head before turning to the red-headed girl, who was staring up at him. Goku gave her a grin and held out his hand. Hi, I'm Son Goku, what's your name? The girl looked at his hand for a moment before clasping it, allowing the boy to help her to her feet. My name is Urza, Urza Scarlet. Urza stood carefully, worried that her body would give out on her again if she moved too fast. She furrowed her brow as the boy started poking the bandit leader's face with his staff. What are you doing? I was hoping that he would get back up so we could fight some more, that wasn't very fun. He went down way too easy. Goku pouted and shoved his staff into the bandit's nose one last time before giving up. He turned back to look over to Urza, who was looking at him funny. You just attacked a group of bandits for fun. Well, it looked like you needed help too. Oh yeah, I forgot to ask, are you okay? You look like they really beat you up. Urza's look of confusion quickly morphed into a scowl. They did not beat me up. I've just had nothing to eat in a few days, so I'm very hungry. If I was at full strength I would have beaten them just like. Urza cut herself off and looked down at the ground. She had promised to not tell anybody about what had happened at the tower. She had been told that if she started talking about her time there, her friends would be killed. Even telling this one boy in the middle of nowhere could lead to the deaths of all of those she cared about. Luckily for her, it appeared that Goku had only caught part of what she said. His eyes were bulging out and there was an expression of horror on his face. You haven't eaten in days, he exclaimed, tears starting to gather in his eyes at the thought. I don't think I could go a single day without eating. Come on, I'll give you one of my magic beans. Goku grabbed her by the hand before she had a chance to respond, and began dragging her back the way he came. Urza struggled desperately to stay on her feet as the energetic boy pulled her along at high speeds, her body barely able to keep up. They came to a stop a minute later when Goku saw the same bush he had eaten from earlier. He picked one of the beans off the bush, examined it for a moment, then abruptly turned around and shoved it into the tired girl's mouth. Not expecting the move, Urza was barely able to swallow the bean without choking on it. Much like Goku, she was instantly filled with a burst of energy. The redhead watched in shock as her body completely repaired itself, and her stomach was left feeling completely full. She spent several seconds examining herself, trying to see whether she was truly healed or if it was some sort of illusion. Her hand trembling, the young mage brought her hand up to her eye patch. She unwrapped the bandages around her head, and all of her doubts vanished in an instant. Her eye worked, it had been healed. Thank you so much for healing me. Goku just grinned back at the girl, rubbing the back of his head sheepishly. With her thanks now out of the way, Urza turned her attention to another subject. The sound of her hand smacking his face was loud enough to startle the birds for miles around. They all took to the sky, cawing in terror as the redhead began yelling at her unsuspecting victim. Whether you healed me or not, you shouldn't just shove food into a girl's face. It doesn't matter if you were just trying to be helpful, it is still incredibly rude. Were you never taught any manners? Goku's face changed to a dumbfounded expression, but not for the reason Urza was expecting. Wait, you're a girl. A real girl. I've never met a girl before. Grandpa always said that if I ever met a girl I should be on my best behavior and be as polite as I possibly can. Wait, you're saying you've never seen a girl before? Besides Grandpa, you're the only other human I've ever met. The only, you've been that isolated your whole life. Goku completely ignored her question. Instead, he was walking around the astonished girl, examining her from every angle. So do girls not have tails then? Are there other differences besides that? Urza's eyes immediately jumped to Goku's lower back, where she had finally noticed the brown monkey tail that was poking out from the top of his pants. How had she completely missed that before? Why do you have a tail? People don't have tails. Nah, all little boys have tails. They just fall off when we get older. My grandpa told me so. There is no way that's true. I've spent months with other boys our age and none of them had tails. Urza reached out and grabbed the tail, yanking it up to her eye level for closer examination. Goku froze, and giving a small yelp of pain he slowly fell forward, face planting on the ground. Urza blinked, not quite sure what to make of the situation. Her hand unconsciously loosened and Goku's tail slipped free, falling to the ground beside him. Goku lay unmoving for a few minutes before he finally snapped out of his pain-filled stupor and returned to his feet. "OWWWWW," he groaned, gently clutching his tail. That really hurt. It was weird, like all the energy in my body was being squeezed out of me. For the first time since Urza had met him, Goku wasn't smiling. He was looking at his tail like a kicked puppy, sadness etched in his features. Urza continued to watch him in silence. She was unsure of what had happened, yet she felt very much responsible for it. Goku looked up at Urza again, maintaining his shell-shocked expression. Please don't tell anyone about that. I want to be the strongest in the world like my grandpa was. If people knew about what happens with my tail, I'll never become as strong as he is. I'll never win another fight again. Urza immediately nodded her head, seeing how easily such a weakness could be used to defeat him. I am very sorry for my actions. I truly did not mean to hurt you like that. I beg your forgiveness, please strike me as punishment. Goku's attention was quickly drawn away from his tail towards the young girl. Hit you? You mean like a fight? Alright, awesome. Goku instantly lashed out, catching Urza off guard. The last thing she saw was a tree flying towards her head. Then there was nothing. Urza returned to consciousness with a pounding headache. Her eyes opened slowly, taking in her new surroundings. She was no longer out in the woods. Instead she appeared to be inside some sort of hut. The redhead rose to her knees slowly, and glanced around the small room. She paused at the sight of Goku devouring a fish more than twice his size. He gave her a cheerful wave and passed her a small plate of food before turning back towards his own. Urza had to turn her back on him in order to eat without losing her appetite. Only when Goku finished filling his black hole of a stomach were they able to resume conversation. How did you hit me so hard? I've never felt a blow as powerful as that one before. I was only expecting you to leave a bruise at most. I already told you, I'm training to become as strong as my grandpa. He was really powerful, and I want to be just like him. I must apologize for underestimating you. It will not happen again. So is this your grandpa's house? Where is he? Also, why did you bring me here in the first place? We were right next to a magic bush that could heal wounds. I can get a feel for energy, and I wasn't sure if it would be safe to take more than one at a time. I didn't want to accidentally kill you or something. You went down way too easy before. I still want to fight you. I brought you here because it was getting dark out. I wasn't sure if the moon was full tonight or not. I brought you in here so that the monster can't get us. Monster? What monster? Grandpa always told me about a giant monster that came out on the nights of the full moon. He said I should never be outside on those nights, or he might get me. Don't tell me you actually believed him. That's the kind of stories old people tell kids to make sure they go to bed on time. Where is your grandpa? I bet if I talked to him I could get him to tell you the truth, that there is no monster. There is too a monster. You can't ask my grandpa about him because it killed him. I found him all squished up and bloody inside of a massive footprint. Urza paled at this comment, she had just insulted a dead man. Goku didn't seem to care though, as he continued speaking. He died fighting the monster, so I bet he was happy. Besides, his spirit is in the Dragon Ball right over there. Urza looked over to where Goku had indicated and saw an orange ball with 4 red stars sitting on a pedestal in the back of the hut. Your grandpa's spirit is inside that thing. What is it? My grandpa told me this story a while ago, about how there are 7 Dragon Balls and whoever can gather all 7 together will be granted any wish. The disbelief on Urza's face sailed blissfully over Goku's head. He continued chatting to her about the Dragon Balls for several minutes, while Urza began to contemplate whether or not it would be wise for her to slip out of the house during the night. She had no idea if the boy would be willing to leave, or if he might prevent her from accomplishing her goals in some way. Goku's talking was suddenly cut off as the boy collapsed backwards, taking the young girl by surprise. He seemed to have fallen asleep in the middle of his sentence. She stared at him for a moment, checking to see if he was truly asleep. When he did not rise, Urza decided that she might as well spend the night in the hut and gather her strength. She needed to be at her best to complete her journey safely. She had made a promise, and she was planning on keeping it. Tomorrow, she would continue her search for Fairy Tail. Thanks for listening. If you want the next part of this video, be sure to like, subscribe and comment and hit that bell notification. See you next time.